A woman lies in a king-size bed in one of the most expensive hotels in Los Angeles. She weighs less than 90 pounds. Her name is Barbara Woolworth Hutton. She is 66 years old and she is nearly blind. The nurses who attend to her work in shifts because the job is not medical, not really. It is the management of a long, slow disappearance. She spends most of her hours in this bed, drifting between sleep and a kind of wakefulness that no longer requires the world to make sense. Outside, the city moves. On Wilshire Boulevard, couples in evening clothes are stepping out of black cars heading into restaurants that her grandfather's nickels and dimes helped build. The Woolworth fortune at its peak was worth the equivalent of $900 million in today's money. It funded mansions on 5 continents, a tiara made from Romanov emeralds, and the wedding rings of 7 men who, one by one, left her lighter than when they arrived. At the time of her death, Barbara Hutton has $500 in her bank account. 10 people attend her funeral. If you've ever wondered what it actually costs to be born into everything, stay with this. To understand Barbara Hutton, you have to understand what she was born into and, more importantly, what she was born without. Her grandfather, Frank Winfield Woolworth, had spent 40 years constructing one of the most recognizable commercial empires in American history. The red storefronts, the 5 and dime counters. The Woolworth building, tallest in the world, when it opened in 1913, paid for entirely in cash, in nickels and dimes, quite literally. By the time Barbara arrived on November 14, the 1912 in a townhouse on Fifth Avenue in New York City, the Woolworth family occupied an entire... Her grandfather owned his mansion. Her aunts Helena and Jessie lived in adjacent townhouses. It looked from the outside like a dynasty in full bloom. But the house Barbara was born into was already rotting from the inside. Her mother, Edna Woolworth Hutton, was Frank's middle daughter, born in 1883 into the particular loneliness of a very wealthy family. She married Franklin Laws Hutton in 1907, a financier of considerable charm and considerable appetite for other women. By 1912, the year of Barbara's birth, Franklin Hutton was maintaining at least one mistress with very little effort to conceal. Edna knew. She had known for years. On the morning of May 2 in 1917, a nurse entered Edna Hutton's bedroom at the family apartment in New York and found her. The coroner signed the certificate without an autopsy. The official cause, suffocation from mastoiditis, an infection behind the ear. The family paid city officials to prevent an investigation. It was by every credible account a suicide. Barbara Hutton was 4 years old, and she was the one who walked into her mother's room first. That image, the child standing at the edge of the bed, calling a name that didn't answer, is where the real story of Barbara Hutton begins. Everything that followed, every husband, every palace, every desperate transaction of money for love, traces its root back to that single morning in 1917. Her father, Franklin, collected his daughter and resumed his life. He moved her to San Francisco, then to New York, then to a series of boarding schools in Connecticut and Manhattan. He was his contemporaries noted an excellent stockbroker and a hollow parent. He managed her inherited trusts with enough intelligence that when the Wall Street crash of October 1929 wiped out much of old New York society, Barbara's portion was already out of the market. When she turned 21 in 1933, Barbara Woolworth Hutton received her full inheritance. The figure adjusted for compounding growth came to approximately $42 million, with an additional $8 million from her mother's separate estate. In the depths of the Great Depression, while breadlines stretched from 14th Street to the Battery, Barbara Hutton was one of the 10 wealthiest people in America. The press had already given her a name. It appeared in the papers in 1930, when her family staged her coming-out party at the Ritz-Carlton at a reported cost of $60,000. While unemployed men sold apples on street corners outside the ballroom, blazed with orchids and champagne, and a young woman in white who appeared to have no idea that the world outside was burning. They called her the poor little rich girl. She would spend the next 49 years proving them right. What the newspapers did not print because it did not sell papers was that Barbara Hutton was at her core a profoundly damaged young woman who had spent her entire childhood watching adults use proximity to money as a substitute for love. Her butler, when she was 9 years old, had told her something that she would repeat in interviews for the rest of her life: someday you may be the richest girl in the world. But all that means is that somebody will want to marry you for your money. She did not believe him. She should have. The first one arrived in Biarritz in the summer of 1932. His name was Prince Alexis Mdivani, a self-described Georgian noble whose family had fled Tbilisi after the Soviet invasion of 1921 and had since elevated the pursuit of wealthy heiresses into something approaching a hereditary profession. His siblings were already working their way through American and European. Alexis had been married to an Astor before Barbara crossed his path. The courtship was engineered by his sister Rusadana Midivani, known as Rusi, who had obtained compromising information about Barbara and threatened to destroy her reputation if she refused the marriage. Barbara, 20 years old, alone in the south of France, with no mother and an absent father, walked down the aisle at the Church of Santa Barbara in Paris on June 22, 1933. On their wedding night, Alexis looked at his new bride and told her she was too fat. The marriage lasted 2 years. The divorce settlement cost Barbara between $2 and $3 million, depending on which lawyer was counting. She tried again. Count Kurt von Haugwitz Hardenberg Reventlow came with an appropriately long name and a Danish title and a disposition toward emotional and physical cruelty that multiple accounts of the marriage describe in terms that need no embellishment. They married in 1935. Their son Lance was born in 1936 at Winfield House in London, which Barbara had built and named for her grandfather. The delivery nearly killed her. The marriage, when it finally ended in 1941, cost her another substantial portion of her fortune and a bitter custody battle across multiple countries. The third husband was the one the world remembered. Cary Grant, the biggest movie star of the era, married Barbara Hutton on July 8, 1942, at the home of Frank Vincent Nugent in Lake Arrowhead, California. The tabloids could not resist. They called the couple Cash and Carey. Grant was by every account the most decent of her 7 husbands. He did not humiliate her. He did not drain her accounts. When they divorced in 1945, he was the only man among the 7 who refused to take alimony. He simply left. Barbara reportedly never fully recovered from the loss of him and spent decades afterward testing whether the next man could be what Grant had briefly been, a person who seemed, at least for a moment, to be present. He never appeared again. By her 5th marriage, even the press had lost the ability to take her romantic life seriously. On December 30, 1953, Barbara Hutton married Porfirio Rubirosa, the Dominican diplomat polo champion and international playboy who was simultaneously conducting an open affair with Cecilia Gabor. Female journalists covering the ceremony wrote the line that would define the occasion for history. The bride for her 5th wedding wore black and carried a scotch and soda. The marriage lasted 53 days. In the divorce settlement, Rubirosa received a coffee plantation in the Dominican Republic, a converted B-25 bomber aircraft, a set of polo ponies jewelry, and a reported $3.5 million in cash. He was back with Zia Gabor by February. There's a pattern here that is almost too painful to follow in sequence, and yet it demands to be followed because the pattern is the story. Each husband arrived with a credential, a title, a face, a reputation that Barbara Hutton apparently believed would fill a space that no credential had ever been designed to fill. Each one took what was available and left when the supply diminished. The fortune was not infinite. The need was. At the height of her wealth, Barbara Hutton owned properties on 3 continents. She carried 30 pieces of luggage when she traveled. Her jewelry collection included the Vladimir tiara assembled from emeralds that had belonged to the Romanov dynasty, purchased through Cartier. She moved between cities, New York, Paris, London, Tangier, Tokyo, in a perpetual motion that looked from the outside like the life of a woman who had everything. From the inside, it was the life of a woman who could not stay still long enough to be found by whatever she was looking for. Her closest companion through much of this period was her cousin Jimmy Donahue Jesse Woolworth's younger son, who had inherited his own piece of the family fortune and was burning through it with equal dedication. They understood each other with the specific fluency of two people raised inside the same beautiful wreckage. Jimmy was charming, reckless, and consumed by addictions that would eventually kill him. Barbara adored him in the way you adore the one person who never asks you to pretend. On July 24, 1972, Barbara Hutton's son, Lance, boarded a Cessna 206 at Aspen Airport in Colorado just before 6 o'clock in the evening. He was 36 years old. He had wanted to look at a piece of property near his Aspen home, a parcel of mountain land he was considering for development. The pilot was 27, a former liquor store owner with 39 total hours of logged flight time, not instrument rated, not equipped for the weather that was building in the ranges. The plane flew into a box canyon, somewhere above the Rockies. The pilot tried to turn around. The aircraft stalled in the thin air at 13,000 feet and went down into heavily wooded terrain 8 miles from the nearest road. All 4 people aboard were killed. Lance Reventlow, who had once been called the world's richest baby when newspapers announced his birth in 1936, was buried in Aspen. His stepfather, Cary Grant, who had remained close to him for 30 years across the wreckage of his marriage to Barbara, attended the memorial. Barbara did not come. She could not. After Lance died, something that had been bending in Barbara Hutton simply broke. The spending continued, it always continued, because it was the only grammar she had, but the forward momentum was gone. She sold properties. She sold jewelry. She sold the Tangier Palace, then the Cuernavaca estate. She moved into the Beverly Wilshire, and the Beverly Wilshire became her world. She was not entirely without kindness, even at the end. Her cousin Dinah Merrill and Dina's husband, actor Cliff Robertson, visited regularly. Robertson would later describe finding Barbara always in bed, surrounded by half-empty glasses of Coca-Cola and books, alert but fragile with what he called a sweet lost quality. The people on her payroll, however, the nurses, the advisors, the sycophants whose continued income depended on her continued dependency, were by multiple accounts very careful to ensure she remained exactly where she was. In May of 1979, Barbara Hutton had a heart attack in her pen. She was 66 years old. 10 people attended the funeral. She was interred in the Woolworth family mausoleum at Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx beside her mother, whose death she had witnessed at the age of 4, and her grandmother Jenny, who had recognized no one and nothing in her final years, and her grandfather Frank, who had built the tallest building in the world and died of a tooth infection because he was afraid of dentists. The mausoleum is handsome. It is well made. Nobody visits very often. There is a footnote to Barbara Hutton's story that does not appear in most accounts of her life because it does not fit the narrative of reckless spending that the newspapers prefer. In 1946, Barbara donated Winfield House, the London mansion she had built and named for her grandfather, to the United States government. No conditions, no endowments, no arrangements for her portrait to hang in the entrance hall. The gift was simply made, and the building became the official residence of the American ambassador to the court of St. James's. It stands today in Regent's Park, one of the largest private gardens in London. Ambassadors have slept there for nearly 80 years. She funded hospitals in Morocco. She funded schools in Japan. She gave money to strangers who showed her simple kindness in amounts that sometimes startled even the people receiving them. Her philanthropy was not organized or strategic, but it was real, and it was larger than the tabloids ever printed, because generosity is not as interesting as disaster. This is not a rehabilitation. The money is gone. The marriages were what they were. The butler was right when she was 9 years old, and she did not manage to outrun him. But there is something worth sitting with in the particular shape of Barbara Hutton's ruin. She was 4 years old when she understood, without being told, that the people who were supposed to stay do not always stay. She spent the next 62 years testing whether money could change that equation. It could not. 7 men accepted the terms and then renegotiated when they were ready. A fortune that would be worth $900 million today evaporated across 5 decades in a search for something that no denomination of currency has ever been able to purchase. Frank Woolworth built his empire on the principle that every customer deserved to be treated with dignity, that price should be clear, access should be equal, and no one who walked through the door should feel unwelcome or small. He carved that principle into storefronts across 5 continents. He commissioned architects to make it permanent in steel and stone. His granddaughter spent her entire life looking for a single person who would apply that same principle to her. She never found one. The Woolworth building still stands at 233 Broadway. Its lobby is exactly as Gilbert designed it. The Gothic arches, the Byzantine mosaics, the stone caricature of Frank Woolworth hunched over his coins in the entrance hall, counting nickels for an empire he paid for himself. The upper floors are luxury apartments now. They sell for several $1,000,000 each. Barbara Hutton's name does not appear anywhere. The world's richest baby, the poor little rich girl. 10 mourners. Somewhere in that distance is the whole story of what money is for and what it cannot do, no matter how much of it there is.